Hey guys, we're sitting out here. We're going to do a quick little video. I just got back from Kansas and harvested that deer using the decoy, and I want to do a quick little video over my strategies on when and where and how I determine how I'm going to hunt these deer. So number one is, identifying you do have a buck in the area that is a big mature deer that's pretty dominant there, and that's step number one. I use a lot of cellular cameras, both the Tacticam XBs, the Pro camera, as well as our Cutting system there on that particular piece of property to identify those deer and figure out, with that video aspect from those Tacticams, to know which direction that deer is typically coming out, he's heading, and how dominant that deer is. Is he pushing around a lot of deer on those cameras? And that kind of really tells me, whether or not I think I can get away with using a decoy, or what setup I do need to use. So we kind of walk you through this hunt. We placed the ground blind right on our right there on the inside of our fence line there, right there on the, basically it's at the south side of a big open field. And I put the decoy in the big open field. I'm going to say 10 to 15 yards directly north of me. I had a west and northwest wind that evening. That deer was actually facing basically just straight towards me, so he would be facing south. And I knew that deer was the particular deer I was hunting. He typically came out in that buck salad food plot from Nixa Hardware, and he would come out there with those does. Those does would do it. You're following your deer. We're sitting here at the lockdown. I think it was like November 19th is the date when I harvested that deer. And those deer were continuously showing me on that video that they would come out of the bedding, feed there, and then they progress on out into that big field. So I set up right there on the edge of that food plot with that decoy, and basically I had the ground blind there that I just set up that evening. I had the HR 500 here set up. I actually took some of the black part, that cover, and I pulled it out there inside the blind and put that HR 500 right in there, and it worked out very well to protect myself from downwind deer. And shortly, I think I got in there, it was a little bit late, but I think I was in there by 3:45, and probably by 4:15 I actually saw my shooter deer sprint across the field dogging a doe, and he went to the north fence line there, and he was right around 400 yards away at that point. And he hung out there, and I got some decent footage of him, and thought, hey, that's probably going to be it. But we still had a lot of hunting time period. I knew those deer were kind of hanging around, eating, and so we just kind of sat there and waited. About I think it's probably 4:30, we actually had some does that worked out into the food plot they're feeding. As far as I know, there wasn't any big mature deer behind them, but they ended up blowing because they saw that decoy. And that's one thing you will figure out, is those does do not like those decoys. I'm not for sure why, but something about them they just do not like. So what I found best when a deer does blow and sees that decoy is kind of make it more of a realistic situation. So what I ended up doing is I took my grunt call and I grunted I think 2 or 3 different times there, big deep mature grunts. And I figured, well, if there was a big mature deer out there, and he was the one that was blowing, then maybe that'd draw him in. But it ended up calming those does down. They actually ended up working out. They were about 80 yards from me, worked north of that decoy, and then they went on up. So we were sitting at, I think, 450, 455. So I had my rattling antlers there, and that was my game plan, is to be able to rattle 30 minutes or 30 to 40 minutes before dusk there, or in the shooting light. And so I did it for 1 minute, and it probably took that deer, I'm going to say probably 5 minutes to actually appear back out in that field, and he saw the decoy from a little over 350 yards away. So he was really locked onto that decoy, trying to figure out what's going on, And what I ended up doing is I ended up grunting, I think 2 or 3 times at that deer. Again, real nice deep growls, you know, maybe 3 to 4 seconds between them. And once I got that deer's, you know, attention sitting right there in that decoy, I snort wheezed at him once, and that is all it took. That deer, I think that total video of me harvesting that deer was a little under 8 minutes. That deer closed the distance from a little over 350 yards down to 20 yards in 3 minutes. And that deer hung up on me about 15 yards east of that decoy. I could see him out of the window there in the blind, but I couldn't get any footage of him. But he hung out there for 5 minutes, or a little over 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes 30 seconds, if I'm remembering that right. But I thought that was very interesting how that buck was just going to hang out there, and then what he ended up doing is he slowly started working his way towards that deer. What he was trying to do is catch that downwind of that buck to see if there was something going on, and he just could not identify it. You know, I had that west-northwest wind. That decoy was positioned north of me, so, you know, and that deer was always north of me, so he could never catch my wind either. So what ended up happening is that buck, he ended up coming out there 25 yards, and I took the shot. As far as I could tell, based off when I gutted him, you know, hit a heart shot at him, and he ended up running out there, and ended up expiring about 80 yards away. I got to, you know, see that all on film there, and so I just wanted to touch, you know, on a few things about when I use decoys, how I use decoys, how I set up my blind, you know, taking the wind in consideration, using your cellular trail cameras, and that is a great time to use your calls. And I will blind call with rattling antlers several times throughout the year, but a grunt call and a snort wheeze, that is used specifically when you actually have a deer in sight, and the combination of those two can really be crucial and make a hunt extremely successful there. So hopefully this helps you guys out there. Appreciate you guys liking and following our videos there, and like always, hopefully you guys are getting out there in nature, and best luck on your upcoming hunt. I want to briefly talk about this just real quick of how this setup was. And so here's the decoy, here's my blind, all right? That deer actually worked down in here, held up, and then he worked out into this, and this is where I shot him about 25 yards. So just to kind of give you an example, that west wind was coming from here, west and northwest, so it was pushing it back over to the creek here. So that deer from even here could not win me, and that's why this setup was so successful there. You know, seeing it from that kind of perspective really, I think, shows the whole picture a little bit better there, so I wanted to share that.